Everybody, this is Father Warner, and we are in Saturday of the second week of Lent. The first reading is taken from Micah chapter 7, and the Gospel, the popular prodigal son, from Luke chapter 15. I'm not going to focus on the prodigal son. I have several teachings on this topic. Also, you can always go to my blog, pottypadre.com, for the text version of the teaching. But I want to focus on Micah because this 7th century BC prophet, coming from a small town west of Jerusalem, was a man who really had a great passion for God, and he pleaded on behalf of God's people. Now, ironically, the people often heard him, but they never heeded him. And this is a malaise of all times. But Micah constantly goes to God on behalf of his people. Now, Micah pleads to God because he knows that the people have offended him. And even more, they have now come to a point where they simply disregard him. He is preaching primarily to the people of Jerusalem. Micah, in his book, and especially in chapter 7, in the text of today, if you read it, recalls God's love for his people. It's not like God needs to be reminded of how much he loves his people, but Micah, in pleading to God, remembers, he says, Lord, I remember how you took us out of Egypt, how you brought us into the land of Gilead, into the land of Bashan. You'll find this name Bashan also in the prophet Jeremiah, where in describing how fattened the people are, God speaks, or the prophet speaks, of the cows of Bashan, as in the people have become as fattened as the cows are. So Micah reminds, as it were, God, or rather he is remembering all that God has done. You brought us out of Egypt, you gave us the lands of Bashan and Gilead, and your mercy is incomparable, especially to the other gods. But Micah does something very interesting. He reveals to us the core of God's heart, the core of his being, and that is that Yahweh is a God of mercy. In fact, the words are, you delight in your people, you delight in mercy. Now, there's something that we can all reflect upon. What is it that you and I delight in? Maybe we delight in the fact that we have a lovely house, I have a lovely garden here. We delight in our job, we delight in our children, we delight in our families, we delight in our car, our vacations. But Yahweh delights in you and me. He is enthusiastic. That's what delight means. He is enthralled with us. He's crazy about us. And because he delights in us, he delights in that quality that he has deep within, that he is merciful. Now, Micah, if you look at his name, it really, if you translate it, it means who is like our God. It's a rhetorical thing. The answer is, there is no one. We sing that hymn, who is like our God, there is no one. That's where it comes from, this text. So Micah really tells the people, there is no one like our God. His mercy, his love for us is immeasurable. Yet, the tragedy is that Jerusalem, Judah, the people, the priests, the king rejected God's love. You know, deep within us, our hearts were made for God. St. Augustine says, our hearts were made for you, Lord. They will never find rest until they rest in you. But our reality is that we search for God everywhere and rarely go to him. Now, a question that we might ask ourselves is, if God is so merciful, if God delights in his mercy for us, then why did God finally give Babylon, or allowed the Babylonians to destroy Jerusalem? And I think that's a bit of an unfair question, even though I am proposing it myself, because that's a question that goes on in all our heads. Why does God finally do what he does, destroy Babylon? Well, remember that God sent many prophets. You know, at the time of Micah, he was not the only prophet. There were two other prophets who were his contemporaries. Elijah was a contemporary, Isaiah was a contemporary. God constantly sent prophets. God constantly reminded his people of his covenant. And yet, they chose to break it. You know, when things go wrong, we blame God. But God's finger, His hand, His writing is all over our lives, constantly warning us. Now, the final word, of course, is that God hates the sin, not the sinner. So, while our God must enforce a sense of justice, that justice is tempered with mercy. Justice and mercy go together. Because you have a merciful God, it doesn't mean that justice goes out of the window. So will God still love a murderer? Yes. Will He love what he has done? No. And that evidence is seen in the New Testament, because Jesus was not found in the Sanhedrin with the chief priests. He was found in the homes of Mary and Matthew and Zacchaeus, people whose lives were seen as questionable. Now, if you really want to experience and see God's mercy, read Luke chapter 15. And very briefly, I'm going to touch upon this, because you can see the mercy of God in this book. You know, in Luke chapter 15, verse 1, the context is that the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sadducees are grumbling, why is this man eating with sinners? And that is why Jesus gives them a series of 3 parables: the lost coin, the lost sheep, the lost son. Now, when you look at the parable of what has come to be known as the prodigal son, remember that these superscriptions, these titles, were added in the 19th century. They didn't exist in the Bible at first. So the prodigal son, which simply means wasteful, was a title that has been put into the Bible. So the purpose was not to focus on the prodigal son. The purpose was not to focus, if ever there is, and there is in the text, a prodigal father. But the purpose was to focus on the elder son and to show how unmerciful he can be in the face of a merciful father. And that's the point that we all learn from. You see, we are told that the elder son comes back. He sees all the parting going on. He calls the servant. He says, what's going on? And they say, your brother has come back. Your brother has come back. And he refuses to go in, so the father comes out. And what does the elder brother say to the father? Your son. He doesn't say, my brother has come back. Your son has come back, and you have killed the fattened calf. And you can see that he is unwilling to let his brother have forgiveness. He shows no mercy. And here's the ironic thing, that you and I expect God to be merciful, but that mercy must also trickle down from us and through us. If God is merciful to us, then we must be merciful to others. We say that in the prayer of which Jesus gave us, the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our temptations, as our tests, as we forgive those who sin against us. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. I want to end very quickly with a reflection on the prodigal son itself, because, you know, if you look at the narrative, it doesn't tell us whether the elder brother, at the end of that argument he has with his father, whether the elder brother went into that banquet that the father gave for the son who came home. The parable does not tell us what happened. So how do we know? Did the elder brother go in or not? Well, the answer is very simple. I read it in a commentary many years ago, I forget where. But it said something like this. It said, if you have forgiven your brother, if you have shown mercy to your brother, then the elder son joined the party. But if you and I have still not forgiven our brother, then the elder son still stands out. I hope you enjoyed this teaching. Please share it with one another. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do it. I also want to place on record my gratitude to many of you who have reached out to make a financial contribution to this ministry. I'm grateful. I make an appeal, as I said, twice a year, in Lent and in Advent. So don't forget to share this video, subscribe to this channel, leave your comments, and I'll see you tomorrow. It's a reflection for the 3rd Sunday of Lent, and it's an interesting one. Jesus cleanses the temple, John chapter 2. I suggest you read John chapter 2 entirely, including the wedding at Cana. Bye for now.